This week's project is going to be pre-wiring the van. My next big project that I'm tackling is going to be doing my solar and all of my electrical setup, and I wanted to dedicate a video just to doing pre-wiring stuff. The reason why I wanted to dedicate a whole video to doing pre-wiring is because since I have no experience doing electrical at all, I kind of just want to take it one step at a time. And something that is really important to me is making sure that I have a very safe electrical system. Pre-wiring would seem self-explanatory. It's just running all the wire to where everything that you're going to have for your AC and DC system are going to be. But since we are driving a van and it has a lot of vibrations and there's a lot of exposed metal, even though none of these edges are extremely sharp, they will wear away at the insulation on the wire over time. So we're going to be taking extra precautions using things like grommets and split conduit to reinforce all of our wire. Just as background, the solar setup I'm going to be using eventually is going to be the 400 watt kit from Renogy. That's going to include 4 100 watt panels, and then I'm going to be using 2 100 amp hour lithium ion batteries for my setup, just to give you an idea of how beefy my setup is going to be. What you're going to need for this project is all the wire that you're going to use to hardwire your system or for your DC system, as well as all of the wire you need for your AC system if you're going to be doing AC. I'm going to be doing DC as well as AC because I want to have GFCI outlets, specifically for the water heater system, and just to be able to have outlets throughout the van. The wiring you're going to need for this project is 12-2 wire, 14-2 wire, and 10-3 wire. And I'll explain what all those are. 12-2 wire, I got a 100-foot roll of it, is going to be for all of my appliances in my van. That's going to be the fridge, water pump, toilet, potentially a diesel heater. I got 12-2 because it's better to go bigger than smaller, but I also got 14-2 wire for all of my LED lights as well as my fan. You want to make sure that you are sizing your wires correctly. 14 gauge wire is smaller than 12 gauge wire, and I know since I'm going to be using LED puck lights, this is going to be a good sizing because the wires that are actually connected to the puck lights themselves are 16 gauge, and this is 14, so this is going to be larger and it'll be safe for my lights. But for everything else, I'm going to be using 12 gauge just to err on the side of caution so that I am not creating resistance within my wires, creating heat in my van, and potentially starting a fire. The 10-3 wire, which I don't have right now, but I'll put a picture of it when I get it, is going to be for my AC system. It's going to be 10 gauge, 3-stranded wire, and you need 3-stranded wire for your AC system because you need to have a ground. The reason I'm getting 10-3 is because in order to ground your whole system to the chassis, it needs to be 10 gauge. So I'm just getting a 100-foot roll of 10 gauge, and I'm going to use it for all of my AC wiring, even though it's going to be really expensive. But the AC system is the thing I am the most worried, stressed about in terms of safety, so I'm just going bigger and safer for that. The next thing you're going to need is wire cutters. I have these 10-inch cable cutters, which are like way overkill, but I am going to need them for 2/0 wire eventually, so I just bought these. I got a pair of scissors to cut my split loom plastic conduit. This stuff is what I'm going to put on the outside of all of my wiring once I run it through like my main highways in the van, just to give it extra insulation, prevent vibrations from cutting the insulation open. And then I've also got these rubber grommets that I'm going to be able to fit into different grooves within the framing itself, and I'm going to be adhering those with some silicone. Another important thing that we want to do in this project is label all of our wiring so that we don't forget what it's for, because I know I'll be able to remember it now, but when it comes time to put the walls on and put everything in, it's going to be confusing and a lot of it's going to look the same. So just make sure that you are labeling everything as you go. With that being said, also, we want to make sure that we have a bunch of extra wire on each end. I have heard that you want to do 3 feet on each side, which is a lot of extra. Depending on what it is I'm wiring, I will probably do that for the ones that I'm not 100% sure where the fridge is gonna go or the toilet's gonna go. For some of the other systems, I might only do like 2 feet because I don't want to have to buy more wire. The wire is actually kind of pricey because I've been trying to get like really good quality stuff, or like made in America. Made in the USA wire is really well rated, and I'm trying to just be safe as possible. I've got electrical tape too. I don't know if I'm gonna end up needing this for this project, but you're gonna need it down the road, so you might as well just get some. Let's get into it. All right, so I got my first wire run. I did my fridge wire, and that's probably the one that's gonna be like the furthest away from where my solar setup is gonna be. As you can see here, I added some extra and labeled it. My kitchen is going to be right when you open the sliding door against the back wall. And then it ran up, and my main highway is going to be through this area right here, and then it's going to be down, coming near the window, and then underneath, and it'll eventually be mounted onto the garage on the right side looking in. I also labeled it on the other end. Don't forget to do that. As you're running the wire, you'll get an idea of where the friction is in the van, like the corners and stuff and the metal that you'll need to reinforce the wire with. I don't necessarily think you need to put plastic split conduit on everything or grommets in every single hole. The plastic split conduit though, I think you could probably just put it on the places where it's touching the wire and not necessarily where it's going to be just like hanging loosely. Like I'll definitely be putting stuff in right here, but maybe not right here, if that makes sense. So I'm just gonna continue on wiring stuff, kind of feeling it out as I go, and then I will be back with comments if I have any words of advice. So the next one I'm gonna do is pretty easy. It's just the toilet. Toilet's gonna be somewhere in this general area under the main seating bench. I need to remove this at some point and use my hole saw to cut a hole to feed all of the wires through eventually. So just for right now, I will probably end up leaving it loose here and then running it behind through this part and down here later. I don't know, maybe I'll be able to do that right now. Yeah, we'll see. You want to prevent twisting your wire as much as possible, and when you're feeding it through your main highways, you want to try to push the wire in the direction that it wants to go. Otherwise, you can end up getting twisting of your copper stranded wire over time, which can also create resistance. So I actually think that this part right here, you can't feed it through, so I'm just gonna leave extra, which is why we're doing the extra thing anyway. And I will figure out a solution for this later, like behind the wall or something. Maybe I'll like feed it up in here and then drill a hole out the side. I haven't decided yet, but we'll figure that out later. More wiring. Okay, so I just finished pre-wiring all of my 12 gauge wire. I had just enough with the 100-foot roll to do everything that I needed, which was my fridge, my toilet, water pump, and then eventually a diesel heater. And the diesel heater one is actually pretty long. I'm thinking that if for some reason I don't end up doing the diesel heater, it could just be an extra for something in the future. But now we'll be moving on to 14 gauge wire, which will be for all of my puck lights and the dimmer switches I'm going to be using for them. So my puck lights and all of my lighting is going to be through DC, and everything is going to be in parallel. I'm going to have 6 overhead lights, and then I'm going to have 4 under the cabinet puck lights, for a total of 10 lights. The overhead lights are going to be on their own dimmer switch, and then the cabinet lights are going to be 2 dimmer switches. I'll talk about this in a future video doing my whole light installation, but with running your wires in parallel, you're going to actually need 3-way connectors to connect the lights to the hard wiring that you're putting in the system. But right now we're just gonna be running the main wire that goes through the van. So for our overhead lights as well as our under the cabinet lights, we're going to have 2 separate runs for each individual set of lights. And I'll just use the overhead lights as an example. The 2 separate runs with the 14-2 wire, one's gonna go from the power source or the fuse box to the dimmer switch. And then the other run is gonna go from the switch up to the lights themselves. So for each set of lights you're going to have 2 runs, which for me, since I'm going to have 3 different dimmer switches, I'm gonna have the overhead, and then I'm gonna have 1 for underneath the kitchen, 1 for underneath the bedroom. That means I'm gonna have a total of 6 runs with this 14-2 wire. As of right now, I've fed all of the puck light wire around the whole perimeter of the van, and I've got this loose piece here. This piece is going to connect to the first puck light and then go down to the switch. First two lights are going to be somewhere up here, and then the switch is going to be somewhere down in the front. And the key thing for this whole process, and we talked about in the 12-2 wire, is that you want to leave a lot of slack for these, because when we're doing the three-way connectors, we will be pulling this out slightly so that we can connect this wire to a third piece of wire that will connect with male and female adapters to the puck light. I know it all sounds kind of confusing right now because there's no visual, but you really want to leave like a bunch of extra slack that you could, like, you know, grab it with your hand out of here. So just keep that in mind. So I've got the loop where my first light is going to be, and then this part is fed down to where the switch is going to be at the end with a bunch of extra wire. And now the rest of it is going to come back and around, and then the last light in the parallel setup is going to be over the kitchen. So this will be the first light, and then it'll like loop around, and the last light will be the one directly across from it. Now what I'm going to do is, since I have a bunch of like slack here for where I'm going to put the light, I'm going to go back around and pull out a little bit more wire and more slack for the other 5 lights that I'm going to be putting in. All right, I just got done running the overhead lights to where the dimmer switch is going to be, and now I'm going to run the second wire from where the dimmer switch is going to be to the fuse block that it's going to be hardwired into. And then I'm going to label these, and then we are done with the pre-wiring for overhead lights. And we'll just do the same thing for the puck lights that go under the cabinet. So I had enough 14-2 wire to do all of the puck lights and under cabinet lights. I ran out though, and I still need to wire my fan. I also need enough 14-2 wire to do my 3-way connections for my parallel overhead puck lights, so I'm going to have to order some more. The roll I got was 100 foot, but I think it's 50 feet red and 50 feet black. So I will need to buy some more wire to finish pre-wiring, but I'm going to move on to all of the insulation and protection portion of this. So I have my main highway that pretty much goes around the perimeter of the top of the van. Most of these corners I'm going to for sure put plastic conduit on the outside and kind of bundle them all together to consolidate and make it cleaner. And then there are some smaller holes. This isn't the best example, but I'm just going to use it as an example where the plastic conduit sleeve won't fit in, and so I'm going to use rubber grommets with silicone for those ones. Alright, so I just did a couple of grommets and split conduit, and this is what it looks like. Something I've noticed initially is that with the places I want to put the conduit, it's really hard to get it up in there, but it actually slides up and into the corner really easily. So if you give your wire a little bit of slack and then put the conduit out and slide it up into the corners, it makes it a lot easier to put it in. With the grommets, I find that it's easier to cut them in half and then put them around the wire. Otherwise, you're going to end up having to take all of the wire out of the holes that you've already fed them through. And they're not like a perfect fit because a lot of the holes, at least in the Ram ProMaster, they are oval shaped, and so you're going to have to make the grommet fit to whatever the size of that hole is. This one's a really good example of a really small hole that you can't put conduit on. I'm going to end up running this wire through that tiny grommet hole. So the grommets I'm putting in are kind of hard. They take a lot of elbow grease, but they're definitely worth it. Most of my wiring highways, like all of the wire is running through there, so the space is just really small to get the grommet in, and that's what's making it difficult for me. So I'm done running the plastic conduit and dry fitting the grommets into where they need to go, and all that's left to do is silicone the grommets in, so that's what I'm going to do now. I obviously haven't pre-wired the fan because I ran out of wire, and I haven't pre-wired my AC system yet. The AC system is like same but different. I've had a really hard time wrapping my brain around GFCI outlets and AC and, you know, having a ground wire and everything. So I'm going to do that after I finish everything for the DC system. So we're going to silicone the grommets, and then we're done with pre-wiring the DC system. It's been a few days and my wire for the AC system has finally arrived, so we're gonna put that in today and finish up this pre-wiring project. The wire I chose to get was by the brand Anchor. It's marine wire made in the United States, and I got 10-3. 10 gauge wire is definitely overkill for the amount of outlets that I'm using. I'm only putting in 3 outlets. One is going to be a GFCI outlet, and then there's going to be 2 regular outlets that will be in parallel downstream of the GFCI outlet. Running the wire is going to be the same as doing the puck lights, since those are going to be in parallel as well. So basically what I'm going to be doing is running from where my whole solar is set up in the garage to where the first outlet is going to be, which is going to be the GFCI outlet, and it'll be under the sink. And then I'm going to run from there to the other 2 outlets, which are still to be determined, but one's going to be in between the kitchen area and the living room, and then I think I'm going to put one in the cabinet for charging electronics. In terms of running the outlets in parallel, I'm able to just run one like feeder wire to where all 3 outlets are going to be, and then I'm going to have an extra separate wire to connect the middle outlet because it's going to have a 3-way connection due to it being in parallel. So let's go ahead and run that wire, and then this project will be all finished up. So my first outlet in my chain of outlets is going to be the GFCI outlet, and it'll be going under the sink because that's where my water heater is going to be. And you want to put GFCI outlets where there is the potential for water to touch an outlet. It also is important to put the GFCI outlet first in the chain, because if you have any issues down the line, it will trip all of the outlets and then none of them will work. So you won't end up having like a short circuit. I changed my mind. I actually decided to run this from where the main highway of everything goes around to putting it this way and then putting it through one of these like center ceiling beams. It's going to be a shorter route, which will use less wire. And the main highways that I've already run, the 2 like bottleneck spots where I put rubber grommets in, it's going to be really, really tight fit, and the grommets don't fill the entire circle. And I don't really know how I would prevent like vibrations from cutting through the insulation over time. So I'm going to just choose a different route with my AC system, make note of that, and if I have to fix anything, I'll know where it's at. And it's kind of cool to keep them separate so I can keep them also separate in my mind. I think generally somewhere down here is where the first outlet's going to be, and then I'm going to have another one maybe closer to the window over here, and then one up in the cabinet. So I'm going to run just one continuous wire up until the last outlet that's going to be in parallel, but I'm going to leave a bunch of extra slack in case I have to move around the outlets for their final place. Now I'm going to reinforce all of the AC wiring like I did with the DC by putting rubber grommets where there are sharp edges and then wrapping everything in split conduit, and then we'll be done. And that concludes this project. I'm so happy to be done with pre-wiring the van. My brain is going into full solar right now. I've been doing so much research on AC, DC systems, making everything myself because I am buying, which I'll talk about in the next video or whenever the solar video comes out, but I am gonna have to make a lot of my own cables and everything for my solar system just because I am buying a prepackaged kit from Renogy, but a lot of it isn't sized up properly to what I need it to be in order to be super safe. So it's been a lot mentally recently, and it's nice to get this project started. Overall, it was a pretty easy project, but it is very important to know what the general layout of your van is going to be. Otherwise, it's going to be a lot harder to run wire if you don't have that figured out yet. With that being said, you can get a general idea of where you want to put stuff and then just leave a lot of extra wire if that works better for you. The overall cost for this project was around $330. With that being said, 170 of that came from buying the 10-3 AC wire. So if you're only running a DC system in your van, then it'll be around 160 bucks for pre-wiring. Yeah, I tried to find cheaper wire for 10-3, but I honestly wanted to go with the safest option, and Anchor and like Blue Sea Systems and all this like marine grade wiring made in the United States I think is the way to go. It may cost more money, but you are getting good quality and peace of mind with having like really safe to US standard wire. Yeah, the next project is gonna end up being solar. I haven't decided yet if I'm gonna do 2 separate videos based in doing DC first and then AC. I probably will, just because I have a feeling it's gonna be, I literally live next to a park and an airport right now. Anyway, solar is going to be next. I'll probably do a video all on DC and then another one on AC, because I feel like it's going to run really long if I do it all in one video. But if you're looking forward to that, give this a like. If you found this useful, give it a like as well. And please leave me a comment below if you have any questions or concerns. Any electrical people out there. I know this is still really basic, so I'm sure I'll get stuff in the next videos being like, you did this wrong or whatever, but hopefully not. Hopefully not. Yeah, leave me a comment though. I just want to like meet all of you and talk, and I don't know, if you're building out a van, let me know where you're at in your van build too. Yeah, so excited to get into the meat and potatoes of this whole van build, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye.